Welcome to Richer Soul. Today we meet Justin, who worked and saved for 10 years, became a millionaire, and retired at 33 while raising 3 kids. Welcome to Richer Soul, Life Beyond Money, the last baby step. Imagine it's 12 months from now. You've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? What's it like to have great relationships, friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures. Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time. Your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. I help people live the life of their dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. You can learn how by listening to the framework in episodes 1 through 9. It's simpler than you can imagine. You can also hear actual coaching calls by looking under the coaching call tab on richersoul.com. You'll also find all the show notes for this episode there, and there's a link in this episode. I send out a monthly email, and you can sign up while you're there. In the monthly email, I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. I also share the most interesting articles I read on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. Today's focus is health. A man who has his health has 1,000 dreams. A man who has lost his health has but one dream. What are you doing to be intentional in maintaining and improving your health? We're going to see massive changes in life expectancy and new medical advances that will allow us to live longer. If we want to enjoy our years, we need to ensure that we keep our bodies moving. Just like our minds, if we don't move our bodies, they atrophy. When you move, the body reacts by growing stronger. In order to fuel that growth, we need to be highly focused on the fuel we put into our bodies. Unfortunately, as we've talked about in past episodes, our corporate food is not designed in our best interests. Creating a meal plan that allows you to perform at your peak and is enjoyable is important. Diet is something you want for a lifetime, not for a couple of months. First, you need to challenge some common beliefs. Breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. And depending on what you eat in the morning, you can put yourself on a path to even worse food outcomes throughout the day, as you deal with sugar highs and lows. Unfortunately, most breakfast food is full of sugar, including the fruit you think is healthy. There is groundbreaking work in the microbiomes of our gut and how important good gut health is, especially to mental health. Let me see if I can find us an expert to have on Richer Soul to talk about this subject in greater depth. In the meantime, start reading and learning. One book I recommend is called The Plant Paradox by Dr. Gundry. I read that probably 6 months ago, and after reading that book, it helped me make some small improvements to my diet that allows me to lose another 10 pounds. And I enjoy what I eat. Today, we're going to meet Justin from the Root of Good. At 33, Justin retired from a career in civil engineering to spend more time with his family and pursue his interests and other hobbies. Justin founded rootofgood.com, where he shares advice on reaching financial independence and enjoying the early retired life. After graduating from North Carolina State University with degrees in civil engineering and Spanish, Justin earned a Doctor of Jurisprudence degree from the School of Law at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He lives in Raleigh, North Carolina with his early retired wife, 4-year-old son, and 10 and 11-year-old daughters. Let's meet him and learn about his story. Welcome to Richer Soul, Justin. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks so much, Rocky. Glad to be here.
So let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I would say my family taught me a good bit in the sense that I think we were always aware of money is an issue, but it's not really an issue. In general, we had enough money, comfortable, middle class. My dad had a job. Occasionally, he would lose the job, more out of economic hard times, being in the textile industry, and then plants shutting down and us moving to a new city and changing industries. And so we kind of got a little bit of that. I was 8 or 9 years old when that happened. And so I remember, this is going to be a transition period in our life. But we had a house, we lived somewhere temporarily, then we had a new house and went to a new school, a new city and all that. Some of those issues were on the forefront even as a kid. And then our schools apparently in North Carolina are really good with teaching people about money. I took a class on personal finance in 6th or 7th grade where you learn how to balance a checkbook and have a budget on a very basic level, but they still taught it in school. It was an elective in our middle school. Then we have a class on economics, legal, and political systems in high school. Sometimes it's called civics. In that class, they taught us about preparing your taxes, what the stock market is. Hey, here's a pretend trade. Let's go buy this share of one share of stock and let's go trade this stock. Still pretty basic, fundamental level kind of stuff, but apparently it's a lot more than they have in some states in the country.
And it is, because I think in most of the conversations I've had with people, their schools have taught them very, very little about money. If most often the comment is nothing, and they tend to learn from their parents. It seems like you got more than the average in regards to that. And maybe that's why you had more than the average success in life.
Could be. And I think also I was interested in money as well from an early age. And so I think my interest in that also led me to take a class like personal finance, to choose that and to pay attention in high school when they taught this, hey, stock market, taxes, investments, like what is all this stuff?
Was it just something you naturally had, or was there something that sparked that interest?
I don't know. I guess it's just one of those things. I saw the utility of money from a very early age, going to the store and being able to hand over money and exchange it for something cool or, some candy or whatever. I don't ever remember not liking to have money. It's always been something that's been something I was interested in, having money and getting more of it.
Were there conversations then with your parents, or was it more just kind of the experiences you had?
I don't remember any real specific conversations about it. I remember one year for my birthday or Christmas, they got a money kit, like a money-related toy set that had pretend money in it, and I think like a pretend checkbook register and maybe like a little spinning game that involved money, but it was money specific, money, bills, coins, that sort of thing. Kind of like an educational toy type of thing. So I guess I had an interest in it from early on. I don't know where it came from, but my parents, they got me that toy at least.
Oh, that's interesting. Most people don't have that kind of a background. So are you doing something different to teach your kids about money?
I probably have more conversations about it. And I think maybe it's because I'm here all the time. I'm not working. I'm retired. So I'm around my kids more. And I think they know that I have a blog and, we retired early. And so I think there's more questions that may come up along the way because our lifestyle and our money lifestyle is different than most of their peers at school. So I think some of the questions come up naturally and we're pretty open about it with them. And so they do see that side of the money aspect. And we talked about how the finances work with early retirement and having investments and savings, and where our income doesn't really come from a job like most people. Our income comes from these big assets that we have, these big investments that pay dividends, and we can sell them and take capital gains. So that they kind of get that on a fundamental level, but it's more of a background piece of knowledge, more so than we sit down in any kind of a formal arrangement. More like a dinner table conversation may come up, and then we talk about investments for a few minutes.
And that's cool. And because you have the freedom to do that, you can actually sit down and have dinner with your kids, which is nice.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about this. You were able to retire at 33. You didn't do it because you sold a massive company or won the lottery. You kind of did it through some basic financial stuff. Can you share that story with the audience?
Sure. The short version is I essentially worked for 10 years as a civil engineer here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We saved, invested, paid down the mortgage, almost had it fully paid off by the time I quit working. 10 years of a career. So we managed to save $1.3 million after about 10 years of a career in engineering. And then we got there through the same things that a lot of people do, but maybe in a more compressed way. We were saving half of our incomes or more, tax efficiency, taking advantage of those 401ks, IRAs, that sort of thing. Focusing on lowering our expenses, keeping our expenses low and reasonable. We didn't really engage in a lot of lifestyle inflation that most people have when they make more money. We really stuck with our starting salaries and then saved those bonuses and saved those raises throughout the years. So that just added to our savings rate. And 10 years later, we managed to save a good bit of money and quit working.
That's amazing. On average, how much were you saving per year during those 10 years?
It started out around 50%. Then as we got raises and made more money, our expenses stayed more or less the same, plus some inflation in there, I'm sure. So we ended up saving probably 80% by the end of our working careers.
You know, that's a different mindset. Most people end up with lifestyle creep. How did you prevent that kind of from happening? How did you make those day-to-day decisions to say, even though I'm making all this money and everyone around me is living like this, I'm not going to live like this?
I think part of it might be because the people around us were not really living too much higher than we were. We live in a sort of a working class / middle class neighborhood. Plenty of professionals, but also plenty of blue collar folks. There's not really a lot of extravagant spending around us among our peers. Our families are not particularly wealthy, or at least they don't spend like they're particularly wealthy. There was just not really a whole lot of that peer pressure where we felt like we were not fitting in. I worked in engineering, so I think people in the engineering field tend to be a little bit, maybe weirder is the right word. They don't always have very large spending like some industries where it's very extravagant, it's very public. You know, you have to have the nice clothes and the nice watches and the nice accessories, the nice car to show that you've arrived. I didn't really see that a whole lot in the engineering field, so it felt like it was okay to drive an older Honda sedan. It felt like it was okay to wear polo shirts to work. So I didn't really feel a lot of the pressure or peer pressure to spend a whole lot more money.
And that's interesting because I think for most people and in most jobs, that's actually what happens. There's a ton of peer pressure to spend, to go into more debt and to buy fancier cars and to kind of keep up and look good. And you were able to keep yourself out of that whole game, so to speak. That's impressive.
The company I worked for most of my career, the president of the company, of course, he was a multimillionaire, and it was not a big company, 20, 30 people, 40 people at the peak. I looked at what he drove, and he always drove an old beat-up Jeep Wrangler or Jeep Grand Cherokee, one of the Jeep, but it was not like a brand new one. It was one of the crappier cars in the parking lot, mine probably being a little bit worse than his. But this guy is a multimillionaire. He owns the company, but he's got one of the worst cars in the parking lot because he's saving his money. And then it was a big deal when he actually upgraded to a new used Jeep later, toward when I left the company, right before I left the company. But that was sort of that mindset of like, these people here really aren't spending a ton of money. They're really saving it. They're investing it. So I guess I was fortunate to be in that kind of environment where most of the people there were relatively sensible with money.
And they say you were the average of the 5 people around you. And clearly in your situation, it seems to hold true, because when you're not around people who are forcing you to spend more, it becomes much easier to not have to do with that.
Yeah, that's certainly true on the spending front. I think we probably spend just like, the average of the 5 people that we know the best. It's certainly, there's not a whole lot of high spenders in our close social circle or family circle. So, yeah, that makes sense.
So were there other people where you worked who also were able to retire early, or were you kind of the abnormal one within that?
There was one guy I talked to that had that as a goal, but I think it was more of, I'm just going to save a whole bunch of money and then one day I'll be able to retire early, without really that specific mindset of, his was more of, I want to save a whole bunch of money and make a bunch of money through investments. I want to retire early. Retiring early was a very secondary goal for him. It was so I think there was that mindset there in a limited sense, but I wouldn't say it was pervasive, or that I haven't really seen anyone else actually quit working in their 30s or even 40s. But yeah, there was actually a second guy there at the engineering firm. He wanted to get out of the rat race and just start his own little side business and work 10 or 20 hours a week and lounge by the pool the rest of the time. So I guess he would qualify as someone who had that as a goal as well.
That's interesting. You also were able to grow your money quite well. And I think part of that was the luck of the stock market run these past 10 years. You've had a wonderful time period to invest. And from what I understand, your investment philosophy is basic. You're not doing any kind of fancy investing, are you?
No, it's really just plain old index funds that you can buy from Vanguard.
And the thought process there is to keep your fees as low as possible? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, the idea there is low fees, low expenses, high tax efficiency, so you're not paying a whole lot of taxes on the investment income or capital gains. And really that low fees equates to higher average returns because your fees come right out of your returns. And essentially, it was a bet that I'd like to be above average, but I don't really care if I'm the absolute best investor out there, because above average will get me to my goal.
Very true. And so you said something interesting in that your investments are tax advantaged. Was that because they were in retirement accounts, or is it just because you would buy an index fund and hold it, and since you don't sell it, there's really no taxes on it other than a little bit of dividends?
Some of both. So about 3/4 of our investments are in tax deferred accounts, mostly traditional 401k, traditional IRA, a little bit in Roth. And so those are obviously, you don't pay tax on those each year. But then the other quarter of our assets are in a taxable account. But those are all just passive index funds where you're absolutely correct. You get 2%, 2.5% in dividends each year, but those are mostly 0% taxed at what's now the 12% bracket. So we're really paying no tax on those dividends from our investment accounts. And I'm not buying and selling them all the time. So there's no capital gains tax due each year. It's really just they go up in value, but I'm not selling them. And so I'm not paying tax on it. So from the taxable accounts, the brokerage account, I'm really not incurring a large tax burden from that either.
And you've been very good about tax optimization. I say, for me, taxes are my number one expense by a massive margin. But you've been able, even when you were working, to minimize your taxes. How were you able to do that?
Probably the two biggest things would be those qualified retirement accounts, making those massive contributions to the 401k, the IRAs. I also had access to a 457 account when I was a state employee for a few years. And so just putting in the maximum into all those accounts gave me an immediate tax deduction of many, many tens of thousands of dollars. So right off the bat, I think I saved 15 or 17,000 a year from contributing to all these different retirement accounts. The health savings account is another one. And then having kids, we have 3 kids. And so having 3 kids led to another $5,500 per year in tax savings from the standard deduction, the child tax credit. When we were working, we spent a little bit on child care, so we got the dependent care credit. So you add up all those different tax savings from kids, which was about $5,500 per year for us, plus the other $15,000 to $17,000 from adding tons of money into your investment accounts. And we reduced our tax bill by more than $20,000 per year. And so just from doing things that anyone can do if they have kids and they have access to the retirement accounts, $20,000 per year, that's then is being invested directly back into our investments. So we have this additional stream of income of $20,000 per year to then put back into the pot to grow even more.
And I think this is an area that people just do not focus on, is being intentional with tax optimization. And if you do it right and you play the game well, that's pretty much free money that's there to have and to utilize.
Yeah, I think so. And, there's always that question of future tax burden when I start pulling money out of the accounts. And so far, I just haven't really paid much at all in taxes for those kind of tax moves, those withdrawals. I think in the background, there's this, I don't know how much, $100,000 or several $100,000 now that I saved in taxes, that it's invested and it's growing, that will then pay those future tax liabilities. So I think I'm going to come out ahead by a large margin long term over the years by saving all this money on taxes early on.
Are you looking at any of the Roth conversion ladders in taking out a little bit each year and converting it over?
Yeah, that's definitely part of our strategy, not only to get access to the money well before age 59, but also that long-term strategy of keeping our overall tax burden low throughout our lifetimes. And so we've started doing that now. In the past few years, we've started the Roth IRA conversion ladder. That's going to help us get more money into that Roth space. And once it's in there, it grows long-term tax-free. So I think that's definitely a smart move, something worth looking at if you are looking at retiring early, or you find yourself 45, 50, 55 and out of work and you're not paying a lot of taxes. It may make sense to look at converting some of your assets to Roth account.
And again, it's just being intentional. So out of curiosity, was there any fear in leaving the job and walking away and saying, you know what, I'm done, I'm good?
I think not really fear. I think there was just a little bit of anxiety over, is this the right decision? I think it's natural. And if you don't have that, there's probably something backwards in your wiring, because if you've lived in such an intentional manner to get to that point where you're retiring in your 30s or 40s, I think you're very cognizant of those risks that are out there. And obviously one of the risks would be you didn't save enough money. And so I think I went into it kind of thinking, well, my backup plan, my plan B is just to go back to work, and I'd be no worse off than anyone else who just continued working indefinitely. So it was, the first 6 months or so, it was sort of an adjustment to ease into the whole idea of not working, not being productive, not having this earned income coming in the door to cover all the bills.
Your wife also retired early, so you both didn't go at the same time, correct?
Yeah, she quit working about 2 years after I quit working.
And was that the plan up front, that she was going to do that?
The original plan was actually for both of us to work for a couple of years beyond when we did, just because we had developed this long-term date of, I think it was April 1st, 2016, just based on portfolio projections and vesting schedules and bonuses and all that. And she actually came pretty close. She quit in February of 2016. So it was just before the original deadline we had set. And I quit working about 2 years before that deadline. And actually I got let go from my job. So for me, it was more of a decision of, are we there yet? Or do I need to go look for a job? And so it was kind of, philosophically, it was, I could say, well, I could always just go back to work 6 months from now or a year from now. It's no big deal. But as soon as I quit working, we ran the numbers and said, okay, we're close enough. Let's just do this. And so she put in place a plan to leave her job as well. It just took her about 2 years to execute on that. But in the meantime, she was able to downshift a whole lot. She actually took 2 sabbaticals during the summer for 5 weeks one summer, 12 weeks the next summer, fully paid. And we went on vacation as a family and took our big, long summer vacations. She resigned. They made a counteroffer. She worked half-time for about 6 months, working from home. And so it was kind of a phasing out of her work schedule. So it was pretty nice to ease into retirement for her. And she wanted to leave on her terms and finish up some projects and turn things over in a smooth manner. And she wasn't in a big rush to get out the door. She always had like a pretty comfortable 40 hours per week job where she was at. So I think it was more if she wanted to leave on her terms instead of just feeling like, oh, okay, well, let's just quit right now immediately. Let's drop everything.
And that's important. You have to have closure and do things the way you want to do them.
Yeah.
And do you get bored? I mean, what do you do all day?
I am still waiting to get bored. I have enough interest in projects going on at any time that if I start feeling bored, I fall back to one of my go-to activities, and that usually solves the problem. It's always solved the problem so far. I've never just sat here and been like, oh, I'm bored. I have nothing to do. I really wish I had to go to work every day at 8 a.m. again. what do I do every day? It really depends on the day and the week and time of year, really. I kind of explain this in terms of it's like a split personality. So 9 months per year, we have 3 kids. So 9 months per year, the kids are in school. We're subject to their school calendar. And our vacations slow down a whole lot. We can't really leave during the school year as easily. And so we help out at school. We volunteer there. We're very busy with the kids, making sure their homework is done, after school stuff sometimes, having their friends over. So it's kind of we're here in Raleigh, we're hanging out around home, maybe take a vacation or 2 here and there. So that's the school year. And then the 2 or 3 months that they get off for summer, that's usually when we pack up and we head off overseas somewhere, or not overseas. Sometimes we go to Canada. We've been to Canada twice for the summer. We've been to Mexico once for 7.5 weeks. We went to Europe this past summer for over 9 weeks. So it's usually a big summer trip that takes up a month or 2, something like that. And then the school year is sort of different. And when we're in Raleigh, some days we're busy with some kind of an activity at school, volunteer activity. Other days it's lounging around the house, which, could be watching Netflix, reading a book. I love playing video games. That's sort of my guilty indulgence. So it's sort of just a mix of activities. I just bought a bike, so I've been out riding that some. We off and on will go swimming, play tennis. We're really busy planning trips. When we have those big trips like going to Europe, we spend a lot of time planning the trips, researching it. There's always that next big trip on the horizon, so there's something to do there. I have a blog, so I spend some time working with the blog. So it's just sort of a mix of activities that there's enough things where I can't just sit all day and watch Netflix for 8 hours. That would bore me to death. I couldn't handle that. But, 2 or 3 hours of binge watching something, hey, sign me up. I love that.
So do your kids get much peer pressure at school, or do you live in the type of community where that's just not so much an issue?
That's an interesting question, because when they were in elementary school, it's a very lower to middle class demographic there. So there's not really a whole lot of wealth at the school. When they left the elementary school and went to the big middle school downtown, that's magnet school, so it's a lottery process, and it brings in kids from all over the county, and it brings in a lot of very wealthy children. We certainly saw a cultural shift in the wealth levels from elementary to middle. It's like night and day, where the kids are having their iPhone X's, and there's, it's no big deal to drop $1,000 for a cell phone, and like kids are smashing their cell phone because they're tired of their old iPhone 7. They want to upgrade to an iPhone X. And like that kind of mindset was sort of shocking. And I think our kids look at that and say, this is really stupid. Some of these kids are just ridiculous with their parents' money. And so that's good to see that, their humble beginnings at the elementary school, I think that kind of formalized their understanding of wealth some. And so I think they approach those $1,000 cell phones as a luxury and not something that they're entitled to, if that makes sense. So, we said, well, you can get whatever kind of cell phone you want if you want to take your money and buy the cell phone with it. And so they said, well, I don't really care about all that. Let's just go with the cheaper version. And so they have cell phones that are less than $100. And one of them lost the cell phone. So it was nice that when she lost it, she didn't have to pay a whole lot to replace it. But I think of everything in terms of cell phones, because I think that's probably the biggest status symbol in middle school now for kids. But I think we see that there is a lot more wealth now that they're in the middle school. And I don't know that there's a lot of peer pressure among their actual friends, but there is certainly that group of people at school that there's the clique of the wealthy, exclusive kids that they go and get coffee from Starbucks and hang out at the most exclusive shopping mall in town. And they live in a certain area and have certain clothes. And there's that aspect of it. My kids don't seem to be interested in that particular social group.
And that's difficult. And it sounds like your school has enough of a mix that your kids can find their own group and not have to worry about that. I'm wondering, though, are those parents really wealthy, or are they just spending more than they have?
And that's a great thing to point out. And we've mentioned that to the kids, is that when they say one of their friends is wealthy, we say, well, maybe their parents just have credit cards or a good line of credit on their house. And so I think that's something that we do point out, is that a lot of these people, their parents may have a high income, but they may not really have any kind of wealth there, so that they're one paycheck away from not having any income. if their job goes away. So we've talked about that and, just the attitude of, well, that some people may be really wealthy, but you would never know it because they just don't spend that much money or they're very humble about it. And that's certainly true. I mean, it doesn't take that much to look wealthy in terms of dollar amounts. And there are credit cards out there. There's credit available for your housing. Housing is not that expensive in Raleigh. So, $500,000 or $1 million gets you into a relatively exclusive area, relatively exclusive neighborhood. And it's not that hard to get a mortgage for $1 million these days.
No, it's not, unfortunately. And people do overextend themselves. And I think a lot of times if the parents are working constantly to keep up that lifestyle, then they feel guilty for not being there with their kids. And so they compensate by handing them a phone.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's just what society is. It's awesome that you've been able to step away from that and being able to do that. And it sounds like you're not in the circles where you're constantly being challenged or people are looking at you like you're weird to do this.
No, I don't think so, but I don't really enjoy spending time in those circles anyway. So I'm pretty happy where I am.
And that's good. So you took a trip to Italy this summer.
Yeah, we spent, out of the 9 weeks in Europe, we spent about a week in Italy, split between Venice and Milan.
Okay. We were in Italy this summer, too. I didn't have the luxury of planning as well as you did, so I think we spent far more than you did.
Oh, okay.
And that's okay. I mean, we do that because, that's just the issue of life. When you have the time to do it, you have the flexibility and the ability to go do things at a fraction of the price. And the cool thing about that is you're still able to live, and I think you've said that, you live a six-figure lifestyle without spending six-figure income on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be cool. Like, share a little bit about the trip and how much it cost and how you were able to take this pretty much. You were there for 9 weeks, right, throughout Europe?
Yeah, it was right at 9.5 weeks throughout Europe. And so we started, I guess, a quick kind of backstory. So I do some travel hacking, which for those not familiar, this is getting those hotel points, getting the airline miles. A lot of these come from credit card sign-up bonuses. So when you see, hey, sign up for this credit card, spend $4,000 in the first 3 months, and you get 50,000 airline points. Well, I'm that guy that will go and do this several times per year, each time with a different card. I get all these airline miles. And so we actually managed to fly to Europe and back for free. Well, free. We had to pay tax on the tickets. So it was about $400 total for the 5 of us in taxes for the tickets. But we flew over there on United, a regular airline, flew back on United, and we had a flight in between from Portugal to Spain, a free flight as part of the frequent flyer redemption. But we spent 300,000 United points to get over there and back. We stayed at Airbnbs the entire time we were in Europe. We were in 14 different cities throughout our time there in 8 different countries. And every single time we stayed anywhere, we stayed in an Airbnb. So the cost per night was a lot lower than if we were to get 2 hotel rooms, because there's 5 of us and a lot of hotel rooms in Europe. They really only sleep 2 or 3 people. So we were facing essentially 2 hotel rooms every night versus renting what was usually a 2-bedroom, sometimes a 3-bedroom apartment, occasionally a 1-bedroom with like a sleeper sofa. We just kind of, like Venice was one place. We really economized, got a smaller place that was a 1-bedroom with a sleeper sofa. But we were only there 2 nights, and it was just crazy expensive in Venice versus other places where we were like, oh, let's just upgrade to a 3-bedroom and let's spend a third of what we do in Venice, but have a much, much bigger, nicer place. But we stayed in Airbnbs. That saved us probably half of what we would have spent on hotels. And they were nice. It was, nice big living rooms to spread out and relax. And it's great with 3 kids. They can kind of go off to their own bedrooms, or, sometimes we had 2 living rooms and we could spread out. It was nice to have that extra space and not be in hotel rooms for 9 weeks, because we would have gone crazy as a family. Probably would have, I don't know, I would have sent the kids back home with grandma or something. But we flew over, started in Lisbon, Portugal, worked our way to Spain, then went to Italy. After Italy, we went to Slovenia, which is just an amazing hidden gem. If you have not been to Slovenia, check it out. That would probably be my number one suggestion for, like, if you've never been to Europe and you happen to be near Slovenia, if you're in Austria or Italy or Croatia or somewhere, stop by Slovenia. It's worth it, especially if you can get out in the countryside. Just beautiful, incredible scenery. And the prices there are half or a third of what they are in Italy or Austria or Switzerland. Just amazing there. After we left Slovenia, we went to Austria for a few nights, Germany, Czech Republic, and ended up in Amsterdam. So I think that's 8 countries, but I may have missed one.
It's amazing to think that you can do that. And what was the total cost of the trip?
Yeah, total cost, I think I budgeted like $10,000, and that doesn't include the free airfare, which was probably about $6,000 worth. So for planning purposes, let's say I planned on about $16,000. So a little bit less than $2,000 per week. And part of that is because we're traveling very slow. We're spending a week in most places. We don't have airfares every other day or bus or train fares every other day. Again, like I said, we're staying in Airbnbs instead of hotels. So take your hotel budget and cut it in half. We had a big kitchen in most places, so we cooked some of the meals or a lot of the meals in some places. But we ended up spending, out of the $10,000 budget that I had planned on plus the free airfare, we spent most of that. I think we came in just under $9,000. So about $1,000 per week out of pocket, which, is obviously a fantastic budget, fantastic spending level for 5 people in Europe. But we did stay in some lower cost countries, Spain, Portugal, Slovenia, the Czech Republic. Those all are relatively inexpensive by European standards.
And you still had fun, and it was enjoyable.
Yeah, it was a blast. It was actually our first time ever being in Europe. So we sort of jumped in head first and decided to do a huge trip as our first trip ever. And it was really nice. We really had a good time in every city we went to. It was kind of hot in the southern parts in Portugal, but in Germany, the weather was incredible. We got to see so many different kinds of places as we went across the continent. It was really good. I think our kids enjoyed seeing all that. We hope to make it back someday soon.
In traveling there, did you notice that they live life differently than we do?
Yeah, the cities are certainly built differently. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a medium-sized American city. We have public transit in the inner core of the city, and as it spreads out, it's harder to use public transit. We don't really have a lot of bike infrastructure. It's hard to get around by bicycle. There's sidewalks most places in the city, but you really don't see a lot of people doing anything but driving a car. And I think that's the biggest difference. You see a lot more in Europe. I don't know if it's, I'm sure it's a policy level decision where they support public transit. They support alternative modes of transportation like bicycling, walking, and they have the infrastructure for it. They have bike paths, they have sidewalks, they have great transit. And so I think it's easier to not have a car in the cities in Europe than it is in Raleigh, North Carolina, for example. And so that part of it was really nice. The fact that we didn't need a car for 2/3 of our trip and we got by just fine. Where they live, the places they live in are usually smaller, at least inside of the cities. And I think part of that might be the wealth effect, just because in the U.S. we tend to be kind of wealthy and housing is relatively cheap and affordable. So that, kind of the two things that we saw. A lot of the stuff is sort of the same, though. You go to the grocery store and it's a lot of the same stuff that you see here. They have bakeries and butcher counters and fresh produce. And so that was one of the interesting things, is just seeing the shift in different kinds of groceries they have, what's local in Spain or Portugal versus Germany, and a lot of those regional specialties that we see in the U.S. And over there, it's just prosciutto or jamón ibérico. It's just like, that's the local product and it's dirt cheap, but it's delicious. So we enjoyed seeing those cultural differences and tasting them as well.
And when you have the time and the ability to do it, then you can go enjoy that. And I think that comes down to, there's a lot more cost to working than we might imagine. And part of that is the ability that when you want a vacation, you're kind of stuck on someone else's schedule, or you're stuck. Well, I guess you have to pay a higher price if you have limited time. And you having the time to be able to make your own choices gives you the freedom to find much better deals that are out there.
Yeah, and I think that happens in two ways. And one of them is we have the time to plan it out and get a good deal and make sure we're finding the cheaper times to travel. And we're flexible in terms of the second way is cheaper, is we're flexible in terms of day of the week. So we can, if flights are cheaper on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we can fly in somewhere on a Tuesday and fly out on a Tuesday. And, we're not stuck with, well, we have these 2 weeks and these are the dates that I get off from work because I requested it 6 months ago and they approved it. and we have to do this on these 2 dates, but it's so much more expensive and the hotels are more expensive. And so, yeah, I think it was, we were flexible in terms of being able to fly in and fly out of 2 cities that happened to make sense for our trip. And they were cheaper in terms of lower taxes that we had to pay. We didn't have to travel at a really fast pace. So all the travel costs to get there and back, they're spread out over this much larger time period. And that's something that I've heard a lot of people, they would hear about our trip to Europe of 9 weeks, and they would say, oh, wow, we went there as a family for 2 weeks and we spent $9,000. Same as you guys, but you stayed 4 times as long. But it's really just, if you look at those fixed costs to get there and back, it's the same price, whether you're there for a long weekend or whether you're there for 9 weeks. And then in between, it's just, where are you staying? How are you spending your money? And how fast are you traveling? And if you can slow it down some, that's when we would get discounts for a weekly stay versus staying for 5 nights or less in Airbnbs, 25% off, sometimes 40% off. So that's another way where we can stay for 7 nights for the same price as 5 or 6 nights a lot of times.
And that's very true. When the kids were younger, we would go to Disney a lot, and we would just rent a timeshare. And you could rent a timeshare in Orlando for a fraction of the price of a hotel room. And we'd always go for 2 weeks because Disney tickets, once you get beyond 3 days, a 3-day ticket and a 10-day ticket, the price differential, I think, is about $20. And so we could go to Disney for 10 days or 7 more days for an extra $20, and we would just take the time and take it slowly. And when you have the flexibility and ability to do that, life is a lot calmer and easier. And I used to find that when we used to go for a week-long vacation, we were just rushed, and you'd come back and you weren't at all relaxed. But we tend to do 2.5-week vacations, and when you do it at a slower pace and you spread things out, the cost actually goes down. You just have to have the time to do it. And unfortunately, most people don't have the time.
Yep, that's true.
Which is a shame. You've also been intentional with where you live. You picked a lower cost of living area, and that really helps to bring down your major expenses, because housing is probably one of the biggest expenses that we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I grew up here in Raleigh for the most part. My wife is from here as well. So it was sort of an easy decision, given that there are plentiful jobs, decent incomes, and our families are both from here. So we just stayed put. We didn't go out anywhere else. We could have probably made more money in a gross sense. The gross income would have gone up if we would have moved somewhere like New York City or San Francisco. We probably could have made more money in what we did. But given the cost of living, I'm pretty confident that our net income would have been much lower if we would have moved to one of those places, especially given the fact that we were only planning on working 10 or 15 years. From an early age, we didn't plan on working until we were 65. So if you do go to a higher cost of living city and you plan on working for a typical 30 or 40-year career, then I could see your lifetime earnings being significantly higher. But I kind of feel like a mid-sized U.S. city with good jobs and moderate real estate costs, I feel like that's the sweet spot for making a good bit of money, keeping your tax burden relatively low, not spending a whole lot on housing. And, you may also, like we talked about earlier, you may also find your people there. The more frugal, not super spendy, show-off kind of people, I think you encounter those people more in those moderate cost of living cities than you will if you're in Silicon Valley, where everyone's making $250,000 a year, or New York City. I think it's easier to kind of fly under the radar and quietly save your money and invest it if you're in an area that isn't full of relatively wealthy people.
And in each of those areas, though, there are clearly wealthy people, but I think there's a lot of people who live there who aren't wealthy, who aren't making those kinds of incomes. And they're the ones who are really struggling because they don't have the income to support the lifestyle. And it's just, they're on a hamster wheel that they can't figure out how to get off of.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And I feel like if you're poor in America, it's so hard in high cost of living cities to get by. But in middle America, it's easier. I mean, the housing is much, much less expensive. It's still a struggle no matter what. I mean, if you don't have enough money, you're going to feel constrained no matter what. So I think getting to that point where you do have enough income to cover, a safe house, a reasonable house, transportation if you need it. I feel like that sweet spot is not the top 5 cities in the U.S., but that next tier down below them.
And we did the same thing. I moved out of New Jersey because the cost of living was astronomical, both the cost of housing and the cost of real estate taxes. And then you had on top of that state taxes, and you start adding it up, and it just seemed like it was a big hill to get over. And I was like, I can go live somewhere else and have a much nicer life and not have to fight that massive battle. So that's always a great choice to make up front. Just be intentional about it. So, curiosity, how do you handle healthcare? Because today that seems to be a big issue for people.
Yeah, it is. And especially if you're retiring early and you're losing access to that employer coverage. I think we're pretty fortunate today. Since 2014, we've had the Affordable Care Act in place. It's controversial. I think people hear that, or they hear Obamacare, which is the same thing as the Affordable Care Act. And they hear it, and half the people are polarized against it. They say it's horrible. It's caused prices to go up. It's expensive. It's wasteful, et cetera, et cetera. We need to get rid of it. And the other half the people are kind of like, well, it's increased the amount of people that are insured. People are able to get guaranteed issue coverage. It's subsidized for most people, anybody making less than 400% of the poverty level, which is into the 6 figures of income for a household like mine. So it's not just, we're not subsidizing poor people. We're subsidizing middle class, you might say wealthy people, depending on what you consider $110,000 of income per year. That's relatively wealthy in Raleigh, maybe not in a big city. But so anyway, we've been doing the Affordable Care Act insurance, just went through healthcare.gov, applied through there, and puts out how much your subsidy is and how much you pay. And so we've signed up for that past several years, and it's worked great. I mean, we get healthcare if we need it, and we don't really consume a whole lot of healthcare. We've been fortunate in that regard that we haven't really tested the insurance that much, but it seems to have a pretty broad network and it's working out very well so far. In terms of what do we pay, we're able to keep our taxable income relatively low. So we target around $40,000 to $42,000 adjusted gross income each year, which we can spend all that and then some because of the way capital gains and return of basis and all that works. But let's just say $40,000 per year income for a family of 5. We're paying, I think it's somewhere between $40 to $125 per month for family coverage because of those heavy Affordable Care Act subsidies. And so what does that get us? Our current insurance plan, I think it has a $125 deductible, which is shocking. If you have an employer plan, there's a good chance you have a deductible that is $1,000 or several $1,000s. So we end up getting, very good insurance that covers almost everything out of pocket. I think our out of pocket maximum is, $2,000 for the whole family. And we haven't come close to hitting that any given year. So we're pretty happy with the insurance we have so far.
And I think that depends on where you live. Each area has their own cost for insurance, and so some states are much cheaper than other states. Again, being intentional and figuring that out can really help make a big difference in what your retirement income looks like.
Yeah, and it's something you can, the healthcare.gov, you can go in there and plug in your zip code and plug in an estimate of your income, and it'll tell you the plans that are available and the coverage amounts, and you can even pull up the network of doctors. And do you have a choice of doctors? Are you going to have 500 different doctors you can choose from, or is it really this one hospital and this one doctor's practice? And so I think that's good to look at, too, if you're looking at relocating to somewhere. Double check and see, if I'm planning on getting Affordable Care Act subsidies, is it actually something that would work for me? It worked great for us, and I tell people about it, and it's great. But I've heard from other people that say, oh, well, there's only one network. There's only one insurer here, and it's a very limited network, and it's hard to get in there. It's one of those things you can definitely research it online. It's pretty easy to find that out.
In our area, I know they have decent networks, but the cost of insurance is significantly higher. Because I think I went and looked for me, and I think it was over $1,000 a month for our family. Might have even been $1,500. I forget the exact number.
That's pretty typical. And if you get the subsidies, that's when it really drives it down, because it's all dependent on your household size and income, how much subsidy you get. But our plan, I think this year is now over $1,000 per month. But again, we pay less than $100 per month for it.
And again, it's figuring out how the system works, being intentional, and making it work to your advantage.
Yep.
and having the time to be able to do these things. And so that, I think that's the biggest problem for most people, is they don't have the time to be able to dig into these things and figure out how to lower their cost of living and doing all those types of things. So last big money question comes around college. What are your thoughts with college for your kids, and even if it's worth it, and how you plan to pay for it?
Yeah, I think it's still worth it. And that kind of is dependent on what major they end up in. I think there are some majors that have a higher expected value, expected payoff than other majors. And our kids are doing pretty well in the math and sciences so far. So hopefully they'll end up in something STEM related that has a pretty high payoff for that college degree. We're pretty fortunate to have two good options here in North Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill and North Carolina State University. They're both very moderate in price. I believe they're around $9,000 per year right now. So our goal is to at least cover that college tuition in full, hopefully for full whole years. And, they may have to work a little bit, take on some loans. They have some savings. We have other savings. If our portfolio keeps doing as well as it has been, we may be able to pay for full rides for all three of them. And we've saved a good bit in 529s back when our state used to have tax credits for that. So that's going to cover several years for each one of them. And then we'll probably pay a little bit out of our portfolio for the other year or two as needed of tuition. And then sort of, ask them to help contribute to the overall spending. We're still about 5 years off for the oldest one, so we don't have any concrete plans for sure on where they're going to attend college. But we have those two local state universities that are reasonable priced and very good quality education. So that's sort of the general plan. Again, we're several years away, so we don't have any concrete details worked out, or we don't even know what it's going to cost in 5 years. I mean, it could escalate quite a bit. I think a backup plan there is always community college for a year or two, have all those 4 classes, then go in and spend 2 or 3 years at a state college just to cut down the overall cost. This is more if we have to economize and save on college costs. Although I think we're going to explore that idea anyway, just to see, does it make sense, regardless of the cost issue. And then they could always live at home if they need to save on money. We're about 10 minutes from the State University in Raleigh, where I went to school. So my wife and I both went there. So, it worked for us. It'll probably work for them pretty well. But I think it's still worth it for a lot of degrees to go to college. Again, it depends on, are you paying $85,000 per year or $70,000 per year, which is sticker price at some of these private schools, versus are you paying $9,000 a year for tuition plus living in an apartment you share with somebody at a state university. I am curious how people are getting that return on money if they're really paying $85,000 a year for a private university. Is it really worth it? I don't know, but I think people that are paying that amount of money, they also probably have more money to pay for it.
From my experience, there is a percentage of people who have more money to pay for it, but that isn't the average person. I think the average person is going into massive debt. And I think there's a lot of kids coming out with 6-figure debt from school, or their parents are taking on 6-figure debt. And at that point, it's not worth it, because then you've got to spend years of work to pay that back. And again, it's being intentional where you live. Where you live, the cost of college is relatively inexpensive. Where I live, the cost of the state university is considerably higher. And I know, like California, I think it's almost free. So all of those types of decisions have to be looked at. And I think being intentional with work, money, location, all of these things make a dramatic difference in how much you have to live your life. You literally got out in 10 years, which is amazing. And now you do what you want. You have the freedom to enjoy life.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I like how you're emphasizing that, living intentionally, making those choices on purpose. And the same thing, it applies to career, applies to education, where you live. If our kids come to me and if one of them says, I don't really know what I want to do, I don't even know if I want to go to college, I don't know if I'm going to end up in a career that needs a college education, then it's going to be a little trickier in terms of, do we really want to invest a ton of money in this thing that may not pay off? So that whole idea of, do you do a gap year where you take a year off, find yourself, go to Europe, bum around? I mean, I would almost rather pay for that instead of them wasting a year in college and tuition and everything and floundering and not doing well. maybe take a year off, maybe get a job somewhere and figure out, are you better at something that doesn't require a 4-year degree or a graduate degree?
And that's definitely worth considering. I think a lot of times it's that go, go, go. You have to do this, you have to do that. And it's learning to stop and say, do I really have to do that? And I don't know how this happened, but you're a civil engineer and then you decided to go to law school, which is kind of a strange combination in and of itself. And then you never practiced law, right?
Yeah. Well, I practiced it, but never for money. I joined the bar or gained admission to the bar about 6 years after I left law school. And that was sort of a backup plan during the Great Recession was if engineering goes away. I was in real estate development and engineering, so it was hit very, very hard in the Great Recession. So my backup plan was to go do court-appointed work from a public defender kind of stuff as an attorney, or maybe get into bankruptcy law. I thought about patent law. So that was my backup plan, was to actually go back and practice law, because there's law in some fields of law. It's sort of insulated from economic recession. So I helped out some people in the family and did a couple of cases and some transactional stuff. So I went through law school, and then I did several summer internships, clerkships at law offices of different types, and realized that I really didn't like the work that much. And part of it was at a private law firm. I just didn't like the atmosphere there and the coworkers. And again, I think part of that was that lifestyle that they had. It was kind of alien to me, a foreign thing. And I said, well, if this is like a typical law firm culture, I don't know if I would like to spend all my time around these people and have to work all these hours. And so eventually I just decided I'm not going to practice law. I'm going to go ahead and finish the degree, but I'm not going to practice law full time. I'm going to go back, get a nice, cushy 40-hour per week job in engineering and make my millions that way.
And you did. You were intentional. You looked at a situation and said, I'm not going to get sucked in. And that's impressive. I think a lot of times people just don't take the time to think things through and make those intentional decisions. So as I listen to the story and I think of some of the bigger pictures, it's you were intentional in what you did, and you take the time to cut your costs, and you've kept your cost of living extremely low. So that creates a wide gap between what you earn and what you spend. And then by saving all that money, you're able to walk away and go live life on your terms, which is really, really cool. For those people listening, what would you say if people wanted to change the course that they're on and figure out how to get out of their whatever rat race they're in? What would be a good action step, or is there something else that you would consider for an action step based on the conversation we've had today?
It comes down to that living intentionally and having a plan for where you want to be. So if you think about, if you've ever been in a performance review at work where they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, it's not just a question that you need to answer at work. It's a real question that you need to answer in life. Where do you want to be in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? If you love your job and you never want to quit working, well, maybe you still want to think about having the option to quit working, because I think of this more of, if you're 40 and you think, I want to work forever, I don't care, I'm just going to work forever. But what if when you're 50, is your 50-year-old self going to look back at your 40-year-old self and say, 40-year-old self, why didn't you save more money? I would love to not be able to have to go to work every day. I'd love to be able to just take off, retire early at 50, and not have to work anymore. And so I think that's good to think about it in terms of having options, creating options for yourself, coming up with a plan of what you want out of life, where you want to be 5, 10, 20 years out. And then that's when you come up with that general plan, and then that's when you can get down to the details, the framework of how do you get there? Do you need to have a lifestyle change? Does it make sense to move to a lower cost of living city? Are you spending the right amounts of money on the different categories of housing, transportation, food? Do you need to cut expenses? Do you need to go back to school and get, switch to a new career that pays more money to give you that excess income to be able to save? But I think it's really just figuring out where do you want to be and then coming up with a plan to get to that point.
Absolutely. That's what most people don't do. They get caught in the drift. And unfortunately, it doesn't end up with good situations. And just because you want to work for the rest of your life doesn't mean you can. As you found out, you were let go from your engineering job. You have a good degree in a high-paying profession, and yet or recession comes along, or the world changes, and the world's changing faster and faster today, in a sense, you may not have the choice to do what you want to do. Someone else may make a choice for you. And I've seen that over my lifetime in the number of changes that have come along have literally destroyed industries where they're no longer relevant, or what used to be a high paying area became a commodity. And I think that rate of change is going to go faster and faster. So while we may want something, the world may not provide it. And so having that backup plan and the ability to walk away is always important.
Yeah, I think that's key, being flexible too, and accepting the fact that you can predict the short term, a few years out, of what it's going to be like for you in your career and work environment. But when you start going further out, 5, 10, 20 years out, it's so hard to predict what is the world going to be like and what will you be like. And you being your physical self, will you be healthy enough to still work? But also your emotional, your mental self. Will you want to work? Will you have kids or grandkids that totally change things? Will you have this epiphany where, oh my gosh, my life is finite in length and I really don't want to do this until I'm 70? What if I don't make it to 70 and all I've ever done is work and I've never had any free time? So I think setting yourself up to be flexible and have options with what you do in the future, the downside is fairly low, but the upside can be huge.
Absolutely. If people would like to connect with you and learn more, what is the best way for them to find you?
Probably the best resource is I have a blog, and the blog is called rootofgood.com. So check out rootofgood.com. And from there, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. You can find me there. I believe my Twitter and Facebook handles are both Root of Good blog. Subscribe on there either way. You can sign up for email on the blog if you wanted to follow me there at rootofgood.com. I put out an article probably 1 to 3 times per month. Lately, it's been a lot of travel articles from our trip in Europe. Yeah, check out rootofgood.com.
And I encourage people to do so. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was quite insightful.
All right. Thank you, Rocky.
Clearly, where you live and who you surround yourself with can have a profound effect on your wealth. Where you focus your attention is where you get results. What would your life be like if you could retire in 10 years? Today's action step. Where do you want to be in 5, 10, 20 years? Create a plan, be intentional, and examine all the different areas of your life and have a plan for each of them. Do you know how to create a financial plan? The first step is creating your balance sheet. The next step is creating a statement of cash flows. Once you know where you are and where you want to go, it's easy to see what you need to get there. A simple rule for retirement spending is 4% of assets. So $1 million in assets in a 401k or an IRA or just a brokerage account generally provides about $40,000 a year in spendable income. Life is going to throw you some curveballs, so make sure you build your solid financial base before the storm comes. Can you imagine only having to work 10 years and then enjoying the rest of your life? Clearly, it's possible when you're intentional. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit. Is there someone you know who could benefit from what we talked about today? Please share. It helps you build social capital and create better relationships and start better conversations with the people you know, and they'll appreciate you for it. You can always reach me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. If you know of a good guest, let me know. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.